Welcome back, Unity people. It's James. Today we're going to cover enemies. Woohoo! We're on enemies, finally. So, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to first create a game object as a cube. And then we're going to come over here to the inspector panel and reset its position to 0, 0, 0. And in the scene window, we can press F to zoom in on the cube. And this is going to be our enemy. We are going to make it a lot prettier, don't worry. So let's do that first of all. We'll start by scaling it up so it's the approximate size we want. And now we're going to import some textures that I have made in GIMP. That's a door. This is an enemy, a goblin. This is my goblin Goomba dude. And we're going to make him so that when we run into him, he forces us to respawn. And if we jump on him, he gets all squishied. Okay? He gets stomped like a Goomba. Okay, so let's go to our textures folder here, and I can grab our goblin dude and drag him over into textures. And then in the textures folder, select him and set the appropriate settings. We're going to go with clamp, point, 32, and 16-bit. I picked 32 because the image I made was 32 pixels by 32 pixels. Okay? And then we hit apply, and our Goomba dude is ready. Okay, so we're gonna now create a material. Go to the materials folder, right click, create material, and we can name this goblin. And then we're gonna select our goblin texture here. And to get rid of the black parts, we're going to set our shader to transparent diffuse. Alright. So now we can grab our cube and rename this to goblin. And then we are going to give it a tag. Yeah, we're going to tag it as an enemy. If you don't have the enemy tag, you can add it by going here to add tags, clicking on the little drop down arrow, and then typing in a new tag. And then you just put it in here. Okay? And then when you select your object, it will show up in your tags list right there. New tag. Okay, but we want enemy. And then we can take our goblin material and drag it onto our cube. Now you'll see now that it's upside down. So to get it so that the blue arrow here is facing forward towards the camera, and we get this backside where he's actually right side up, we're just going to spin it on the Y 180. Okay? And then if we go back to our camera view and in the game view, you can see that he is properly aligned. Okay? So now if I move him down, so he's on the ground where he should be, right about there, and I play the game now, you will see that when I jump on him, the collision is way too tall, and that he doesn't kill us. So let's get to first fix the collision. Let's move this so we can see. So we need to shrink this down. So on the goblin object, in the box collider, we can actually set the size of the vertical, the green direction here, Y, by just left clicking on the Y letter and then dragging to the left and shrinking it down. And now you'll see that it's not covering the bottom. So what we need to do is actually move the box down, and we can do that with this center stuff here. We can actually shift the box around, and we're going to do that on the Y by, again, left clicking and dragging in a down position so it covers him. And then you can just fiddle with these settings so that it covers the goblin right like so. And then we are going to shrink it on the X because it's a little bit too wide. And we want to get this as close as possible. So there we go. That's a bit too big on one side. And we can actually shift this. And it's right about there. It's close enough. It's close. Yeah. Okay, so now if we play the game, we'll actually see that the collision box is where it should be. We're standing on the enemy, and we actually run into him at the edge of him. Okay? So now what we need to do is make it so that when we run into him, we die. So to do that, we're going to do some scripting. So we're going to go to the scripts folder, right-click, and create a JavaScript, and name this enemy. We'll press enter on that, and then we can click open or double click on the script to open it in MonoDevelop. So there's a couple of things we're going to do in here. Some I'm going to explain later, some I'll explain now. So first we're going to delete the function start because we don't need that. We're going to declare 4 variables. And the first one is going to be private, which means nothing else can access it and we won't see it in the inspector. So we're going to make a private var fall, and we're going to make this a boolean. Okay. The next variable we're going to make is called player with a capital P-L-A-Y-E-R, and that is a game object with a capital G. Our next variable is spawn point with a lowercase s, and that is a transform with a capital T. And the last one is one called stomp, and that is also a boolean, but it is not private, so we will be able to see it in the inspector panel and access it from other scripts, and that's important, being able to access it from other scripts, and we'll get into why that is later. So the player object is just what we're going to use to spawn a new player when we kill him, and the spawn point we're referencing so that we can put him in the proper respawn position. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new function on trigger enter, and we're going to say other is of type collider. Okay. So what we're going to do is when the player runs into the enemy trigger box, we are going to set him back. Actually, we're going to kill him, move him to the respawn a new player, and then adjust the camera. But we've already done all this code in a previous video, and we did it in a script called player respawn, and it is all right here. If other, actually you can see it's function on trigger enter other collider. If the other object that ran into our box is the player, we want to go ahead and destroy the player, create a new one at the spawn point's position, so he respawns at his last checkpoint position. Then we're going to reference the camera, get the camera script smooth follow, and then we're going to set it so that it points to the new player. So we can actually just copy and paste this code right in here. Okay, and there it is. But we also need to check if it's the player, so we can actually, let me undo that. Plumb respawn here, we need to actually take the if with it. So now we go back to enemy and try this again. There we go. And now it's good and formatted. So if the other object that runs into our enemy is a player, we want to go ahead and destroy the player, create a new one, and then reset the camera. Okay. But we also need to check if our enemy has been jumped on before. Okay, so we're going to say if we have not been stomped, then we want to do all of these steps. Because if we've been stomped, we don't need to kill the player, we need to kill the bad guy. Okay? So we'll get into stomping in a little bit, but it's just important to have that code there. Okay, so then we can save this and go back to Unity, let it compile with the little spinny wheel. We don't get any errors. We got a little warning here, but that's not important. We can clear that. So we're going to grab our goblin guy and then click and drag the enemy script onto him. Now we need to assign the player object, which we have in our prefabs. This is the player. We want it to spawn a new player, and the spawn point, which is the place where we want him to respawn. So we can click and drag that from the hierarchy panel into the inspector, and we're all set. So now when we play the game and run into this guy, you're going to see it just, oh, last thing I forgot, on the goblin, make sure that is trigger is selected. That's key. Okay, now let's try this, and we respawn. If we jump on him, we respawn. If we hit him on the other side, we respawn. Okay, so now let's get to stomping this guy to death.